And because it's the government stated thing. Hey up! Welcome back. And you join me in the boring old car in the middle of January in the town of Bingley, in the county of Yorkshire, in the United Kingdom. And the reason I'm in the boring old car is because typically the weather in January in the United Kingdom is less than optimal for motorcycling. It's wet and windy basically, and wind and rain are uneasy bedfellows with motorcycles and motorcycle gear. Unless of course you're somebody like the Missenden Flyer that gets given thousands and thousands of pounds worth of top of the range rucker gear, which the rest of us mere mortals of course can only dream of ever owning. But there you go. So in the car, I mean, it could be worse, couldn't it? It could be snowing. It snows up here. I live at the top of I basically live about 1.5 miles up a steep hill up the side of the Aire Valley, and if it does snow up here, then the only way you're going to get about is four-wheel drive. So this is a four-wheel drive. It has to be in this neck of the woods. But touch wood, so far no snow, because I hate the stuff. I know a lot of people love it. I hate it. It's a pain in the arse. So where to start? Well, I've had a couple of comments regarding the last video I put up, the one entitled Royal Enfield Interceptor Living the Dream. Absolutely love that bike. And there were a couple of comments that said, why did you say at the beginning that if you live outside the United Kingdom you're lucky? Well, let me tell you, for the most part you are. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if you live in some war-torn third world starving country that you're lucky. Of course you're not. But I'm sort of comparing apples with apples. So the bottom line is, here in the United Kingdom, given that we are apparently the 6th wealthiest economy on the face of the planet, things are, to say the very least, poor. They've got strikes left, right and centre because people are getting paid peanuts basically, and cost of living's going through the roof. And yet we hear that inflation's coming down this year, but people tend to forget, don't they, that inflation coming down doesn't mean prices coming down. It means prices still going up, just not as quickly. So that 12, 13, 14% inflation that we've had, that's here to stay, and it ain't going down. So a lot of people, particularly those people whom, for example, as motorcyclists that we do rely upon the emergency services, you know, their spending power has been radically reduced over the years. Whereas a lot of very, very wealthy people have got a lot more wealthy. And this isn't a party political point, it's a political point I suppose, but it's not a party political point, because I suspect this has been happening for a very, very long time indeed. Anyway, but let's get on to a different kind of politics, which is really the sort of politics that directly affects us as motorcyclists and indeed motorists in general. So, oh, before I get started, one thing I missed off that last video, because it wasn't really meant as a comparison video between the BSA Gold Star and the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. I know it looked like that at the beginning. That wasn't the intention, because I've not ridden a BSA Gold Star yet, so that wouldn't be fair. It was really about my experience of the Interceptor. But I wanted to mention, either at the beginning or the end, I can't remember which, but I had a bit of a wry smile at when the first YouTube reviews of the BSA came out, and there were quite a flurry, wasn't there, all of a sudden. And it seemed to happen just after Stuart Fillingham on his channel had said, I don't believe they've got any of these bikes. You know, you can't buy one. I don't think you can still buy one, can you? So there might be an element of truth in what Stuart's saying, but I think he were basically suggesting that it were a bit of a Norton pre-TVS ownership Norton situation where it were all smoke and mirrors and none of these bikes actually existed. I don't think that's quite the case, obviously, but right on the heels of Stuart making that or uploading that video, of course, there were a succession of reviews of the BSA Gold Star, and it was very, very encouraging to see that some of the first ones weren't from the mainstream content creators on YouTube. You know, there weren't the Missing Them Flyers, there weren't Lamb Chop Rides, there weren't the Richie Vedas. You know, there weren't these people. There were if you like, more the rank and file of YouTube creators. And I think one of the first ones, if not the first one, was the All Year Motorcyclist. So, All Year Motorcyclist, big pothole there, I nearly went down. All Year Motorcyclist, well done, good for you. Yours was the first review that I saw. And Missing Them Flyer, you were well late to the party, pal. About time too. Any road up. So I've got that off my chest. So, what I've sort of been looking at today is a bit, and this is on the back of Stuart Fillingham's latest video, or his latest video at the time of me recording this one, which is basically about the increasing restrictions that are being mandated by national and local government in relation to when and where you can use your vehicle. And particularly if it's a vehicle with an internal combustion engine. And there are a lot of what are called ULEZ zones, ultra low emission zones, in the United Kingdom, that severely restrict access, either to all private vehicles, or to non-electric vehicles, or to non-Euro 6 vehicles, or whatever. And the nearest one to this neck of the woods where I am now, and we are just between Bingley and a little place called Menston in the northwest of Leeds. The nearest one we've got's called the Bradford CAZ, C-A-Z, the Clean Air Zone. And just show you a picture of it here. And first thing that springs to mind to me is it's a very appropriate shape for this idea. Oh, done that just sum it up. But it basically extends in a strange shaped corridor from Bradford towards sort of Shipley. And it only applies to commercial vehicles, and what it says is all commercial vehicles. Well, that's anybody that earns a living, basically, driving a vehicle. I mean, obviously, you know, there are people that drive vehicles that are not commercial vehicles that potentially are making a living, but the vast majority, you know what I mean, commercial vehicles, part of a commercial fleet, part of a business, and if they're not Euro 6 compliant, and the vast majority of them are not, basically they can't use that area, and if they do, it's £50 a day if it's a large goods vehicle or a coach. Which is wonderful, isn't it, when businesses are struggling and the cost of living is spiralling out of control, and people are not getting pay increases, because people have less disposable income, therefore businesses are struggling and getting hit from every corner. They're not getting the income because people don't have money to spend, and their own expenses in terms of energy and materials and anything that's remotely connected with energy, which is absolutely everything, isn't it? Let's face it. So they're getting hammered from every corner, and now they're getting hammered in this particular area and other areas across the UK, because they can't afford a brand new vehicle, they can't afford an electric vehicle, whatever. And that strikes me as a nonsense. But if you think differently, let me know in the comments below, please. I'd love somebody to actually present a coherent argument that reassures me that this is the right way forward. But I was thinking about this this clean air zone, and when you look at the statistics, fairly recent statistics from a reliable source, have a look at this graph, and basically what it shows is that the majority of commercial vehicles, goods vehicles if you like, on British roads are between 6 and 13 years old. And there's a significant, a really significant proportion, if you look at the numbers just to the right there, that are 13 years old and over, which sort of tells you generally about what businesses, large and small, can afford in relation to their commercial fleet, doesn't it? Right, sorry about that. The useless bloody GoPro suction mount dropped clean off the screen. Where were I? Yeah, so it's the stated intention of the UK government that from 2030 all vehicles will have to be electric, all new vehicles. So apparently there's going to be no new internal combustion engine vehicles on the market for anybody. So no diesel vehicles. Well, what proportion of the entire goods vehicle fleet in the United Kingdom are diesel vehicles? I mean, 99.9%, something like that. So I suspect what's going to happen if this comes to fruition is that that proportion of operational commercial vehicles which are 13 years of age and older is just going to grow and grow and grow, basically. It's hard to see any other outcome, because, you know, people are just going to hold on to them, aren't they? People are going to hold on to these vehicles. And the other thing that that sort of struck me, particularly in relation to, for example, the Bradford Clean Air Zone, is you only needed to experience the weather here lately and the high winds and the fact that there's no such thing as a localised environment in terms of the atmosphere. So you're restricted in terms of what you can drive in this relatively confined geographical area. But those little emission particles that the authorities are so concerned about, you know, they don't suddenly think, well, yeah, it's cracking round here, isn't it? I love this part of Bradford, that's great, we'll stick around here, we won't go anywhere else. Well, of course they don't, because as soon as you get any amount of turbulence in the atmosphere, it just gets redistributed everywhere else, doesn't it? So I don't quite get it. And also, I know for a fact, having spoken to quite a few people that drive commercial vehicles, that the fact that they're searching out and using all sorts of other circuitous routes around the Bradford area to avoid this clean air zone and to avoid the penalty charge. So all it's really doing is it's displacing a lot of commercial traffic at the moment onto longer routes, creating more emissions, and it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It is entirely counterproductive. Now that's my rationale. Okay, that's my rationale. And you might say, well, what's it got to do with motorcycles? Well, inevitably there is a lag of a few years, not many years, between legislation impacting the general car owning, car driving public, and before it impacts upon us motorcyclists. So it'll come around sooner or later, and you'll have seen lots of, I'm sure you have, like me, seen lots of coverage over the questionable assertion by the authorities that electric vehicles are more environmentally friendly, and yet there is so much empirical data out there which clearly shows that once you take into account the manufacturing process and the need for replacement batteries after something like 70 or 80,000 miles, that electric cars on balance are less environmentally friendly than internal combustion engine cars. And bearing in mind that combustion fuels are evolving all the time to become more and more efficient, but we seem to be sliding down this endless slippery slope and almost sleepwalking as users of motorcycles and motor cars into swallowing this this pill, into taking this medicine. And I really do think that if you look long, hard and impartially at the ever-increasing efforts of local and national authorities to constrain vehicle use under the guise of the environment and net zero and all of these other seemingly laudable aspirations, the only conclusion that I've really been able to draw is that it seems to be part of some bigger plan to severely restrict private vehicle ownership and private vehicle use. And I could be really cynical and say, at the end of the day, I just think it's another example of, let us enhance the status of the already wealthy, powerful and privileged, because they will, without any issue or effort whatsoever, be able to afford the huge capital outlay for electric vehicles, and more than capable of paying any penalty charges that become associated with using vehicles in restricted areas. So it's never going to be an issue for people like that. It's going to be an issue for basically rank and file working people like you and me, because I don't think there's any rich people watching this channel, and that's how it's going. And it's not a party political point, it is a simple reflection on the way things that have evolved, certainly in this country, over probably the last sort of 10 to 15 years. And I just don't understand why people aren't alive. This blatantly obvious and seemingly endless attack on the freedom of ordinary working people. And of course it's ordinary working people that make the money for the elites, the wealthy and powerful in society. So I don't know, it's a great worry. I mean, on the flip side of the argument, can't fail to notice all the global news coverage of, you know, one part of the year it's forest fires out of control across Europe, across the United States and elsewhere, and then, you know, another part of the year just excess flooding. Recently an incredible winter storm in mainland United States, and even more recently that now unprecedented levels of flooding in Southern California. And indeed here in the United Kingdom, the highest recorded temperature since records began at 40 degrees in this country last July. So there is that side of it. I suppose the question, really, the fundamental question is this all man-made? And I don't know, I'm not entirely sure. But what I am absolutely convinced about is that this it's almost a crusade towards restricting private vehicle use. That mission, if you like, is being piggybacked on concerns about climate change. I think that's what's happening. It's like Blade Runner, isn't it? Tears in rain. So much going on that when, you know, so much going on that a small issue that in isolation would be noticed goes unnoticed. And I think that's what's happening. And the only way I can see around it, if my fears and those of many other people become more and more realised than they otherwise are, is non-compliance. And people are in numbers very, very powerful indeed, as history has shown us. So I think there's the very real prospect that when things become unbearable and when people finally wake up to the fact that their individual freedoms and the simple pleasures in life are being restricted, while those of the privileged elites are increasing to thrive, that people will get the message. So that's it for today. If you're still watching this, if you're still listening to this, thank you ever so much. I don't have a monopoly on the truth, but all you can do in life isn't it? There's only one thing that you can do in life, and that's to look at facts, use a bit of deductive reasoning, and work out in your own mind on balance what you think's right and what you think's wrong. But I've slowly, belatedly, absolutely belatedly at the age of 60, come to realise that a lot of the things that you are presented on mainstream media platforms, particularly the tabloid press, I mean Daily Mail, Daily Express, the Star, the Sun, crikey, I won't wipe my backside on any of them. If I had absolute raging, uncontrollable dysentery, I still wouldn't stoop low enough to clean myself up with pages from the Daily Mail or the Daily Express or similar publications, because they've all got agendas. But that now seems to have expanded to the BBC, which has become noticeably, increasingly, heavily state biased, royal family biased, institution biased, and the others like ITV and Sky, not a lot different really. So all I would say is, from my point of view, there's a lot of truth out there on the other media platforms like YouTube, and you know, YouTube, for all its faults, God bless you for facilitating these points of view, because a lot of them are not crackpot conspiracy theories, because they produce the empirical evidence which you can go check for yourself. So anyway, that's enough for today. Like I say, only very loosely biking related. If you've liked even what you've heard and what you've watched, give me a like. If you haven't, there's not a lot you can do about it, because YouTube have removed the thumbs down, dislike icon, whatever you want to call it. You can always put something in the comments, please, as long as it's constructive, as long as it's not an ad hominem. Start again. As long as it's not an ad hominem insult, and that it's a well-reasoned, well-intentioned comment, then that's fine. If you're just going to slag me off, I'll just delete it. I will, I'll read the first 3 words, I'll realise what it is, and then I'll just delete it. So that's only a tiny proportion of people, I have to say, and I wish they'd get a life, I really do. But anyway, right, I'll sign off now. Thank you for watching. Ride safe, above all be kind, and I'll catch you next time. Toodle pip.